Thomas Merton was born in 1915 to two painters. His mother died when he was 6 and his father died when he was 15. He was raised in France before going to boarding school in London as a teenager. Thomas went to Cambridge for 1 year before transferring to Columbia when his grandfather had found out that Thomas's girlfriend had had an abortion. An incredibly popular student, he wrote for the school newspaper and got a degree in English, but shocked his classmates when he tried to join the Franciscans, who sadly kicked him out when they found out about his girlfriend's abortion. Instead, he joined the Trappists in a monastery in Kentucky. In 1949, after 8 years of being a monk, Thomas Merton became an ordained priest. He lived an incredibly simple lifestyle in the monastery, and they did not use much modern technology at all. When the abbot had found out that Merton had planned to be a writer in college, he ordered Thomas to write his life story, which Thomas published under the title The Seven-Story Mountain, which was incredibly popular and given to many young men who were thinking about becoming priests. Thomas continued to write about monastic life and spirituality, and all his essays were extremely popular. They were so popular, in fact, that the abbot decided it would be best for him to live in his own cabin on the grounds of the monastery, where he could write at an even higher rate. During these times, he wrote books such as The New Seeds of Contemplation, Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander, and No Man is an Island. A turning point for Merton came in the late 1950s when in Louisville, surrounded by a crowd, he realized how in love and out of touch he was with people, and that his writing, which was traditionally a more spiritual writing, needed to transition to cover social issues. His most famous work on this, which covered race inequality and war, was the Cold War letters. Probably the main issue for Merton was actually the subject of war. Merton couldn't understand why Americans would be able to get behind a movement such as war, which at the time was the Vietnam War, but they had so many objections to things such as birth control, which he thought cost far less lives and was, quote, hardly murder in comparison to something people could deem a just war. Obviously, this was a very unpopular opinion, and Merton was quickly condemned as a communist. Towards the end of his life, Thomas had a growing passion for Eastern religious thought. He's able to draw a lot of parallels between the monastic lifestyle he led and the emphasis on meditation that you could find in religions such as Zen Buddhism. He made a trip in 1968 to the East and met and spoke with many prominent religious figures, such as the Dalai Lama. This attributed to a sense of global solidarity, as he found that Catholics were much like their brothers in the East. Sadly, this wasn't something a lot of Catholics in the United States or around the world were ready to hear. His trip culminated in a speech in Bangkok on December 10, 1968. Thomas died that evening after giving a speech and was flown back to the United States to be buried at the monastery. He's remembered as the most well-read monk of all time, as someone who could write about both spiritualism and social justice in a way that was meaningful and left an impact, although controversial, on its readers. He was an incredibly talented writer who always challenged his audience to rethink their spirituality and their views on social justice in a way that would bring them into a greater sense of community.